So it's been a hot minute since I did anything Wuthering Waves. Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, excluded my entire timeline profile page. Whenever you look at it, it's just entirely Wuthering Waves for the most part. 3.0 has been incredible. I'm kind of ashamed to admit I never got around to my thoughts on the 3.0 patch update back in December, January. Things got pretty crazy, pretty busy, pretty fast, so I never had time to get around to that. But I think with 3.3 being kind of the focal point of everybody's focus or thoughts right now, I wanted to help kind of explain what happened in the 3.3 main story quest. Because I think there's some misconceptions going on around the Wuthering Waves community, and I think that needs to be kind of explained a little bit. So, without further ado, I'm going to go drown myself in the bathtub if you don't subscribe or follow me on Twitter. I don't know if I can leave that in. Hey, if I never post again, you know what happened. Let's start with Aemeath. After Aemeath is given the coordinates to the Exostrider, she leaps through space-time to give Rover the cassette tape with those coordinates burned into it. The same coordinates that we see at the very end of the 3.3 quest, kind of as the song starts playing. This is when Rover first reaches out for her hand though, and that's after Denia pushes it back with her shadowy hand thing. That's what we see, that's Denia. But before I go any further, let me explain that Denia is not necessarily in complete control of herself. Yes, she knows what's happening. That doesn't mean that she wants it to happen. That's the problem here. She's being controlled by the Fractsidus, the Grand Architect. This is kind of the same argument that you can make with Frolova, just kind of psychologically, emotionally manipulative in some ways. But if you rewatch the story quest, the 3.3 story MSQ, whatever you want to call it, you see that there are times where she wants Rover to go away, to stop chasing after her, to stop whatever Rover is doing. That's her own thoughts, but she knows she's not in control of her actions, and there's a difference there. Denia is aware of what's happening, but she's not in complete control of her actions. That's kind of that scene where you see Hiyuki kind of draw back on her blade. She uses the blunt side rather than actually slashing Denia with it. It's because she knows that Denia is not in control of her actions. She still has to be stopped anyways though. So that's what's happening there. So after Aemeath gives Rover the tape, technically for the first time that we see that we know of, when we see her for the first time in Aleph-1, that explains that situation. But now we kind of have to backtrack a little bit after this to understand the situation now. Remember that Aemeath is holding the tape at the start of the quest before we head into the Deemer Plains. Not only is this tape infused with her memory, it acts as a faint pull for her lingering frequency, the one Hiyuki finds at the end of 3.2. Aemeath's quote-unquote shell instinctively knew to grab this tape before departing with Rover because she knew that her quote-unquote full frequency would need it. Without the cassette, Aemeath would never have been able to burn those space-time coordinates into it before she says, the Exostrider and I will bear it. Specifically, she says, we will bear it, but she means the Exostrider and her. This is the same Aemeath shell, quote-unquote shell, that runs off with the tape in her hands when she goes up to meet Rover and only allows Rover to have the tape. It's because she instinctively knows that she's going to need it, that Rover will need it if we're going to be bringing Aemeath back. Okay, so after she says, we will bear it, we, as Rover, are thrown back into the Lahai-Roi. During this time, Aemeath is biding her time. She's totally lost, lonely. She's counting down the days that technically don't even exist. Those are the tally marks that she's making, where space and time don't exist. It isn't until Hiyuki's familiar leads Rover back to Aemeath, and Hiyuki herself undoing the seal of Flaming Sakura, that Rover is finally able to bring Aemeath back, is finally able to restore her frequency. But this leaves a glaring problem that I'm sure a lot of people kind of realized. If space and time don't exist within a black hole, Aleph-1, then how in the world did she even get those coordinates to begin with? Well, there is an explanation for that. Recall all of the lingering frequencies within Aleph-1, the Thernodian. It seems like all those frequencies that were trapped inside those explorers, their frequencies that had been consumed or trapped within the Thernodian, they offered Aemeath the remainder of their fleeting existences, the frequencies. This is evident when Aemeath tries to refuse the woman who appears to help her. Their despairing voices are, rightfully, woeful and grief-stricken. However, these voices, the despair, are what the Thernodian feeds off of to some degree. That is, until the collective hope of humanity restores that lost light. These lingering frequencies are that light. They are what leads Rover back to Aemeath. Think about the way that they all kind of start to glow really bright. Their color is similar in hue to that of a star. The sun that we are familiar with. This is intentional because the sun represents hope and light. The hope and light humanity, Lahai-Roi, sought to protect. This is when Aemeath receives the coordinates. We have to think in reverse here, not chronologically. Think about the way a black hole distorts space and time, how they don't exist. Instead of thinking chronologically, instead of things progressing in a linear fashion, we have to backtrack or think in reverse here. It makes sense. Why would space and time act normally if they're inside of a black hole where they technically don't even exist? So, chronologically, it makes sense to not make sense. So, when Aemeath receives the coordinates after that, that's when the Exostrider is then piloted by both Aemeath and Rover upon Rover's second venture beyond the Strider Gate. Those coordinates, though, are not just coordinates for the Exostrider, they are the location of Aleph-1. These coordinates were mapped out early on by those who ventured into the unknown and thus were later burned into the cassette given to Rover by Aemeath. They were useless on a one-dimensional plane because the universe is not one-dimensional. Hence why Sigurga says they don't feel flat. The runes we uncover in Lahai-Roi after we're thrust out of the Therodian are what uncover that three-dimensional quote-unquote map, which is when Mornier decides to overlay them the way she does. With those coordinates now in our possession, Hiyuki's familiar inside us, and the Exostrider where we left it, we can now save the light, Aemeath, and banish Aleph-1, at least temporarily for Aleph-1. Keep in mind, the Exostrider says this universe, implying that there are multiple. As we learned early on in 3.0, Aleph-1 has already been successful in other universes. This is foreshadowing. The fight isn't over yet. As for Denia, she is quite literally a vessel for the Fractsidus. At the end of 3.2, the Grand Architect says that useless toys are tossed away, implying here that if she cannot live up to the reasons for her creation, she will be thrown away as well. What we don't know is how much control she has over herself, and that's kind of what I was implying earlier. She makes it clear that she doesn't want Rover involved in the quest that will save Aemeath and banish Aleph-1. Remember, it was the Grand Architect who first cracked the seal to the Therodian, thus ensuring Aemeath's quote-unquote death for a while. 10 years. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Aemeath is a quote, digital ghost for the entirety of this decade until Rover shows back up in Lahai-Roi. The current mythology being loosely based around Norse mythology. During this time, the decade Aemeath is, quote, dead, neither her frequency nor the Exostrider is complete. So why mention Norse mythology of all things? This is a stretch, so bear with me, but in Norse mythology, the number 10 represents completeness or a full set. It's whole and closely tied to human anatomy. 10 fingers, 10 toes. Aemeath can't be complete until Rover restores her frequency. The Exostrider's, quote, heart cannot be complete until Rover allows the Research Institute and Mornier to decode the tape given to them by Aemeath. Only then is everything complete. Now, the Exostrider is essentially the Lahai-Roi Sentinel, and Sigillum is, in some ways, the opposite of that collective hope humanity places in deities such as gods. These two names, Aemeath and Sigillum, are synonymous with each other. They are different names for the Sigillum de Aemeath. The correct spelling for Aemeath, A-E-M-E-T-H, aka the Seal of God, or Seal of the Truth of God. Aemeath is essentially God when she's piloting the Exostrider, and the seal that Hiyuki must undo in order for Rover to reach God is that Seal of Truth. Aemeath's whole thing is about saving the world, something a, quote, savior does, another of Rover's names. Aemeath had to resume her position as, quote, God, and was incomplete without Rover. What do gods do? They banish, vanquish evil. She is bringing God down to Earth when she resonates with the Exostrider. As per usual though, everything we've done still manages to be exactly what the Grand Architect expected. The outcomes don't change the Fractsidus' plans. The sudden disappearance of Ashi Nohara in the Epilogue is concerning, as it's likely the Fractsidus are still manipulating things even in distant regions, which is going to be interesting to see how Aemeath plays a role maybe in the rest of that. For now, it may be best not to speculate on this part of the story, but it does beg the question of whether or not there was a new lament, or if Aleph-1 found its way into Ashi Nohara in another timeline feature that Hiyuki had yet to, quote, burn. Honami was cut off from the rest of the world until Rover helped restore it in 2.8. We have to understand, though, that amidst all of this, Christopher's scriptwriting is still a considerable threat. Frolova, technically, emotionally, is still a puppet of the Fractsidus. The Vice Architect resides in the New Federation, and there's someone in the Fractsidus' ranks of whom we don't know the identity of. Then, all to say, Lahai-Roi is a jumping off point for the rest of the 3.0 story, and not even God can seemingly stop the Devil's Pen. But remember, there's still something that the Fractsidus wants of these memory-type resonators, aka Lucilla, but if the rest of the 3.0 story doesn't somehow incorporate Aemeath and Sigillum, aka the Sigillum D, into the rest of the story, the rest of the 3.0 narrative, it's gonna be kind of weird to just one-off that. Regardless of what happens, you can still save the world if you subscribe and follow me on Twitter, so there is that option. Okay, I'm gonna close this video out here, but I do have a new AMV, or whatever you call them for video games, for Aemeath. Should be pretty cool once I'm done with it. And I'm thinking after that, I'm going to have more of a breakdown on the Sigillum D Aemeath, especially for Aemeath, and kind of the incorporation of maybe her as god in some way. But other than that, I have nothing else to say, and I will see you all in the next video here very soon. Bye.